Okay, we are going to get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's event. My name is Jason Gumpert from MSDynamicsWorld.com, and I am joined today by Glenn McPeak, CEO of Data Masons, for a look at EDI for Dynamics 365 for Operations, also known as AX7. It's for a new session today. Really excited to have Glenn with us. And as we get started, please just know that you can add your feedback and ask questions using the Q&A block that you should see just to the right of the main presentation window today. You can add your questions at any time. I know Glenn will be making some time at the end of the presentation to take any of those that have come in. So without further delay, please allow me to hand things off to Glenn to get us started. And I'm just going to make sure your line is open, Glenn.
Well, thank you very much, Jason. And I really want to thank everyone who took time to attend this presentation today. I hope you find it informative and beneficial. So Data Masons is a company that has been working with EDI integration for Dynamics AX since 1999. And my personal experience with AX goes back to those days when the product had been developed and marketed by Damgard out of Denmark. So I've been working with AX for a long time, focused on EDI for the last 13 years, and over that time we've gained a lot of knowledge and experience with best practice and how to make EDI work well with the Dynamics AX platform. EDI extends to any sort of data integration involving business transactions and master data that might be inserted, updated into the AX platform or retrieved from and transmitted to the outside world. So any type of master file and business transaction integration, that's what we term as EDI. So the agenda for today's presentation is what's changed in Dynamics AX versus AX 2012. So the title of this webinar, Radical Transformation that's occurred in AX7 or Dynamics 365 for Operations, as it's now known, is quite considerable. The user interface, it's if you've seen 365 is a completely different look and feel. They implemented HTML5 user interface through a browser, which is quite a radical shift from the legacy, AX 2012 version. But when it comes to integration, the transformation is equally dramatic. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. One of the things that was introduced is a new entity integration framework, and I'm going to talk about what entities are, the types of entities in 365, and what they are capable of doing or not. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We're going to go on and explain a little bit about how Data Masons approaches the challenges of EDI integration with Dynamics AX and with Dynamics 365 for Operations. And we'll take a little time and do a short software demonstration so you can see what integration can look like with the Dynamics 365 platform. And we'll certainly afford some time for Q&A. So my objective is to keep the presentation relatively brief and have some time for questions and answers. And if we finish early, great, then you can get back to work. So what's happened in Dynamics 365 is that some of the legacy integration functions that had existed in AX now for quite a long time have been removed. So the application integration framework, also known as the AIF, which has been around for 10 years now, was deprecated, so removed from the AX platform, being that it was probably the go-to integration method for many partners, many customers, getting data in and out of AX. That's a pretty significant change. Also deprecated was the .NET Business Connector, which has been around since the initial release of Exapta, and it was retained through the AX platform going until 2012. And again, a lot of applications utilize that framework as well. And certainly those are dramatic changes. As I touched on earlier, Microsoft created a whole new data integration framework, and they're referred to as data entities, and they use a completely different mode of transport of data in and out of AX, and I'll get into further details on that. And they also expanded the functionality and the approach of the DIXF, which is their data integration, import and export framework, so DIXF, which was primarily designed for data file conversions and update. They refer to it as a repetitive type of integration. So that's something that's expanded, and you'll see it due to the new integration framework. There's a lot more opportunities for use of the DIXF. So there are 4 types of data entities in the Dynamics 365 platform. The first one, which is the building block for the remaining entities, is a single data entity, which is defined as a view of a single or multiple tables in 365 that support full create, read, update, and delete operations against the tables that are incorporated into the entity. So the vehicle or the type of protocol that's used for an entity integration is OData using a RESTful web service. So the OData, which stands for Open Data Integration Protocol, is something that we welcome. It's a great way to implement an integration framework, and REST-based web services is definitely a better way to do things as well. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a couple of minutes. These entities can be used, again, via OData and DIXF. So those are the capabilities of a single entity. Extended entities are implemented when there are changes in AX. So for example, if we add fields to a sales table or to sales line or any other table in AX that has a pre-existing entity, best practice says to not modify the base entity, but rather create this extended entity to incorporate the changes that were made. So that's what an extended entity, and it's usable with both OData integration as well as DIXF. Composite entities incorporate multiple data entities into let's say, a much larger, more complex type of entity, and that's what they refer to as a composite entity. Composite entities do not support web service-based integration using OData. It's DIXF only, which means you have to import or export the data to some sort of file format, whatever is supported. And then the final type of entity are aggregate entities. And these entities are read-only and were intended for use with external BI systems or other systems that only needed access to read-only data through web services. And so that's something that for us, for the type of integration we typically would not be needing to use, but again, for reporting systems, it's a good option. So what's the net result of these changes? And this is in comparison to Dynamics AX 2012 and the application integration framework most specifically. So first off, RESTful web services are superior to the SOAP-based web services that were implemented with the AIF and AX 2012. The web service integration in 2012 through SOAP-based services was, in our experience, fairly brittle, because if changes were made to the database schema, say through the AOT, the web service itself would break unless it was updated accordingly on the web service sender-receiver side. So if you didn't stay in sync, it would break fairly easily. And there were question marks, particularly in the minds of the team at Microsoft, as to its scalability. And if you read the technical articles, that was one of the reasons for deprecating the AIF. The authentication method for OData in AX7 is OAuth. And OAuth is a more secure way of talking to the web service. It's a two-level authentication, and it's better than what they had with SOAP. So, not to say that SOAP was not secure, but it certainly adds another level. The data format that was used in AX 2012 was XML-based, and XML is a relatively verbose data format which doesn't really scale well in a integration exercises over the internet. So they implemented JSON, which is a much more efficient and more common way of integrating data across the web and in cloud-based applications. So that made complete sense. With this new framework, we find it's a lot easier to access data as well as business objects within the AX framework. And Microsoft is building a very large library. I think they're up to 1,800 entities now for Dynamics 365. And that's a much larger number of connection points or endpoints into AX versus what you had in the 2012 platform, which was a relatively limited group of out-of-the-box integrations. What we found also is that the OData framework provides not only great real-time feedback when having conversations with the application, but we've found that the way that Microsoft implemented it, that the messages coming back are much more understandable and easier to follow. So they spent a lot of time and they invested a lot of effort in making those messages that are coming through the OData interface a lot easier for purposes of troubleshooting and making the adjustments necessary to make it work. So we've really have been very impressed with that. And then finally, performance, which is a big deal for data masons and for our customers, was something that we were concerned about when we learned that the framework was going to change. And before we had access to it, we, of course, always had concerns. But we've been very pleased with the level of performance that we've seen through the OData integration framework. So we're quite optimistic of being able to scale large data volumes into and out of the Dynamics 365 platform. So what I want to talk about now is just a little insight into the way that we approach integration and how that approach really fits in with the Dynamics 365 design model and integration model. First off, one of our core values is not to make changes in the Dynamics platform in order to handle EDI integration. So rather than trying to build all the business logic related to EDI inside the ERP platform, in our case, Dynamics 365, we instead sit on the outside. And now with the new framework, the data entities, in the case when they don't exist or we need to make changes like implementing extended entities, which are relatively minor changes. They don't really change the core logic of the application. Other than that, there's no customizations required to make deep and broad integrations with AX work. So in order to make all that work, our platform does all the heavy lifting to get the data ready to hand off to AX through the OData entity framework on what I call silver platter. So we make sure that all the data has been resolved before it's passed to AX. That includes having, information such as the correct customer ID, the correct vendor ID, the right item number, the right unit of measure, the right delivery location and address information. So all that data is pre-checked, pre-validated, and just handed to AX to let AX do what it does, which is start building transactions in the AX platform. We deliver full automation, and alerting users when errors occur in a highly automated environment is important, and it's a big deal. So we have a framework to handle that and make sure that the users, and particularly the business users, are notified when action needs to be taken for transactions that need some help to either get integrated into AX or to be delivered out to trading partners. We also deliver a very comprehensive array of document integrations into AX. Now, we're still building our library of document integrations for AX7. As I'm sure many of you know, the AX7 platform is still relatively new. But historically, we've had 70 integrations into and out of the AX 2012 R3 platform, and we fully expect to have as many, if not more, integrations for the Dynamics 365 platform. So having that out-of-the-box support is a big part of what we deliver. We also offer managed compliance and full managed services where our customers can effectively outsource all EDI-related operations to the Data Masons team. Although we also offer flexibility in what you do, so you can take responsibility and ownership of any aspect of the EDI compliance and mapping. So you have the ability to do your own mapping if you wish, but you also have the option of not doing anything with EDI and letting data masons take responsibility for it. And the last important point about the way we approach EDI for 365 is that we not only deliver a solution and an integration platform that takes care of all the heavy lifting, as I mentioned earlier, but we deliver it with a team of experts that understand the AX platform and its opportunities and shortcomings, as well as industry expertise in the industries that are commonly use the AX platform. So our team knows AX, knows a lot about industry-related challenges to deliver good value to our customers. When we talk about EDI integration for AX and for 365, we're not just talking about some of the more common integration touch points, which might be customers and suppliers, but we touch other areas such as logistics providers, carriers, government agencies, etc. So we have very broad and very deep integration touch points in the AX platform. So what I'm going to do now is take you to our solution platform, and specifically the landing page that greets our users when they open up the solution. The solution's name is Vantage EDI, and that's what you're looking at. And what greets you is 4 tiles that represent all the information that would be critical for a Vantage Point user or someone in that EDI administrative role, so that you can know what's happening and react to them appropriately. These 4 tiles, critical alerts, documents on hold, documents ready to process, and then transactions that require additional work for the process to be completed, are all represented here. When you click on a tile, it drills down to subtiles and gives you additional granularity into the message. And when you click on the subtile, that takes you to the specific transactions that relate to the message. In my case, what my critical alerts are advising me is that I've got 47 documents that have been transmitted to my partners, but I'm still waiting for acknowledgement of receipt from those partners. So it's a good way to quickly find out if there might be any issues with delivery of these documents. And then we have settings for durations of time or time intervals for the types of errors that might occur that would make it easier for an administrator to zero in on the most current actionable items. So that's what these subtiles are. The concept of documents on hold relates to the statuses that a transaction can exist within the Vantage Point platform. So we have 3 different statuses: ready, hold, and complete. So ready means that it's ready to process, either be integrated into 365 or AX, or ready to be transmitted to my trading partner. There's also hold, which means that the transaction is either, hit an error. It can't continue until something is addressed, or you may have transactions that are put on hold intentionally by the user for whatever reason that they choose. And then complete, which means that the transaction has been fully processed and gone to its full life cycle of completion. I talked a little bit about how Data Masons has a large library of out-of-the-box integrations for Dynamics AX. And it's based on our long history working with the platform and building out these out-of-the-box document integrations. And you can see that there's a large list that go to AX and a large list that can be transmitted to trading partners from AX. Now, a better way to see those document support is to look at the menu bars that you see on the left-hand side of the screen. And what we've done here is we've taken the common process flows that you see in the context of an ERP platform, such as order to cash. So this mimics or mirrors the common order to cash process flows, all the activities that might transpire with a purchase order, or shipments that are sent out, or known as an advance ship notice or delivery advice, and then a invoice process and all the things that might happen in a typical invoice exchange, and then finally the cash application integration of cash data into AX. And then within this process flow, there's transformations or utilities, and then all the inquiries. So that's probably an easier, more logical way to view the data that, or the different types of interactions that are supported by Vantage Point with AX. This menu bar is procure to pay or supplier-facing EDI activities, logistics and transportation. So interacting with your ocean, rail, motor carrier, public warehouse transactions when you're having a third-party logistics do your transport for you. And then product management, where you're exchanging catalog data, inventory, status, price inquiries, those sorts of things would be represented here. I talked a little bit about industries, and one of the industries that we have a lot, strong heritage and capabilities with is the automotive planning and execution type of activities that you see common in the automotive industry. So we decided to reserve a menu bar for that and represent some of the different integrations and the type of integrations we commonly see our customers required to do in that supply chain. Now, any of these screens can be tailored by role and by user, and they can be eliminated from the screen so that it becomes less complex for the user to absorb. And what you can do is make the entire user experience work off of the favorites concept. So anything that a user might need to use, they can all be located in one easy-to-follow place, and they don't have to be distracted by a lot of other menu options and choices in these flow tile menus. So I created my own favorites area. I called it Glenn's Favorites. And I've grouped these favorites into, just the favorites, and then a daily work and inquiries, and then demonstration group. So you can add the menu items easily into the favorites and then move them around and group them accordingly. So if I came to, say, for example, product management, and I wanted to take one of these options, like send product activity to trading partner, all I have to do is click on the star, add to favorites, and now when I come back to favorites, it shows up, and then I can move it into the group that makes most sense. Now for today's presentation, when it comes to the transactional side of it, I've represented what I plan to do here in my daily work menu. And to exercise some of the document integrations and to demonstrate them, I've decided to do a network connect and download a sample purchase order that I've got queued up in a network mailbox. I'm going to integrate that purchase order into AX and create a sales order. In AX, I'm going to confirm the order, and then I'm going to retrieve and send the acknowledgement out to my trading partner. I'm going to generate a pecking slip journal and send that to my trading partner, to my warehouse. And then I'm going to send, I'm going to do a packing slip update and send a shipment notice to my partner. And then I'm going to do the same for an invoice. I'm going to post and send an invoice. Now, I could hit the buttons to make all this happen, but we talked about automation, and so I'm going to leverage automation to do these activities. Before I do that, I want to point out that I have documents, this document's received, which is filtered on today's date, has no transaction, so I haven't downloaded anything today, nor have I transmitted anything out. So these are the documents I've transmitted today, and that's empty. And I've got AX running in the background. So here's sales orders. My most recent sales order is number 802. So we're going to download a new PO, create a sales order 803, and we'll be able to follow through the purchase order number, which you'll see in a moment. So again, I could hit the buttons to make all this happen, but instead I'm going to open up what we call our Edi Workflow Scheduler. And the Edi Workflow Scheduler is the place where I can take all the tasks and all the tiles that I can hit buttons for inside of Vantage Point and leverage all those tasks into workflows. So these tasks, like for example, my purchase order inbound process, which I've defined here as network download. So I said I was going to connect to a mailbox and download a purchase order. The send PO to AX process is going to transform that PO into a JSON message that's going to hit the OData entity for creating a sales order and generate the sales order. And then I'm going to email a copy of that purchase order to myself. So you can set up automatic distribution of reports. So when documents come in, you can have them automatically sent to your functional users, whoever desires to receive a copy of those documents. So it just saves time having go in, look to see if you receive something, print it out, email it. It's all done for you through the workflow scheduler. So I'm going to come back to the status screen, and you'll see that the service is not running. And I'm going to go ahead and start it by hitting the play button up top. And then I'm presented with an overview screen that shows me what's happening inside the workflow scheduler. So all of the workflows that I have scheduled, and in the case of, as an example, the PO workflow inbound, purchase order workflow inbound, is configured to run once on startup. So when I start the service, it's going to go do that network download, send PO to AX, and then generate the reports. And you'll see it's busy right now, and it just went idle, so it's no longer running, meaning that when I come to Vantage Point, and you'll see I'm starting now to receive some reports. So we'll take a look at those in a couple of minutes in Outlook. So if I look at documents that I've received today, you'll see that I downloaded a purchase order. The PO reference is MSDW for Microsoft Dynamics World, November 2016. So that's this month, of course, and year in honor of our webinar, and that it's been emailed to me. And in raw terms, this is what I received from my partner. This is a fairly cryptic, fairly, well, compact, certainly, in terms of information, but it's enough information to create a properly formed sales order inside of AX. But it relies on Vantage Point to fill in all the blanks and do what's needed for the data to get there. So if I come back to AX and I hit the refresh button, and I scroll to the bottom, I now have a new sales order, 803. And this is our order that we just created. You can see it's for purchase order, MSDW November 2016. And the item that we populated into the sales order is D001, mid-range speaker, which, if we come back to the original document, is nowhere to be seen. So what Vantage Point is doing is it's taking this bit of information and transforming it into the information that AX needs to create a proper sales order. Additionally, that cryptic information has been transformed by Vantage Point into something that we can easily understand. So here's that same document in a printed form, just to give you an idea of what reports generated by Vantage Point look like, and delivered to my inbox so that I can get something that is relatively easy for me to read and understand, which would be useful for your functional users. So let's come back to Dynamics AX and continue the process. So the next step in the process is to generate a confirmation. So I'm going to confirm the sales order. Which is going to populate data into the sales confirmation journal. Which the workflow scheduler has been instructed to watch for. So I have a process flow here of POA workflow outbound. So POA is purchase order acknowledgement, workflow outbound. And you can see it's busy right now. So in a moment, I should see in Vantage Point, when I look at documents that have been transmitted today, a purchase order. So I already have two documents in this data store. The first one is a functional acknowledgement. So Vantage Point automatically generated that functional acknowledgement and sent it out. There was also a pending invoice that was sitting out there ready to send, so that was transmitted as well. So depending on timing, when I hit the refresh button, I'll get the PO acknowledgement. So the next step in my process flow is to generate a picking list for my warehouse. Now, this is a scenario where I would be working with an external warehouse, sending this pick list over to them, and then get a ship notice back from the warehouse. Of course, I'm just sending this out. There's no warehouse on the other side to send something back to me. I'm just, again, providing examples of the type of integrations that Vantage Point supports. And then once the response comes back from the warehouse, or we go through a normal fulfillment process in Dynamics AX, the next step that we would support for sending out an advanced ship notice in the world of X12, which is a popular standard in North America, that would be the 856 advanced ship notice. Other parts of the world that use other standards like EDIFACT, it would be a delivery advice. So I'm going to go ahead and generate the packing slip. And I'm not going to print it to the screen. We'll leave that. We'll print the invoice to the screen in a couple of minutes. Okay, so the packing slip has been processed, and now I can come to the invoice. And in this case, I'll go ahead and print it. We'll just print it to the screen. So it's going to take a moment to process. First time you do something in AX7, it always runs a little bit on the slow side, and then it speeds up. So while we're waiting for the invoice to render on the screen, I'll just remind you that the Workflow Scheduler is watching for processes on an interval. And so if I come back to Vantage Point, and depending on timing, if I look at documents that have been transmitted, I now start seeing other documents showing up. So here's my ship notice that came from the picking slip, and this is a 940 in the world of X12, also known as a warehouse ship order. Instruction to the warehouse to ship this document out with the address information, the item information, etc. We also have an E56, which is an advanced ship notice. And so again, this is the shipment part of the data for the same PO, MSDW, November 2016 purchase order. And then depending on timing, if I hit the refresh button, I have a new document, which relates to CIV 000728. And this document, again, transformed by Vantage Point into the data format with all the rules followed by that partner the way they want it, showing here on the screen, the MSDW November 2016 transaction. If I come back to AX, we should see that invoice number, which is right here. So this is the same invoice that we sent a couple minutes ago. So it's already been transmitted and, in theory, received by my trading partner. So this example process flow just gives you an idea of the level of automation, how integration works, gives you an opportunity to see AX7 in action in an EDI context with some common business documents that we see in the world of EDI. And I hope everyone has found the demonstration, the discussion about the changes in AX7 related to integration, the type of entities that are available, that you find it useful. So with that, I'm going to open the floor to any questions that anyone in the audience may have. So Jason, is there anything out there?
All right, thanks, Glenn. Yeah, so several questions have come in, and we'll start getting to those. If you haven't entered your question, please do use the Q&A block to the right of the main presentation area there, and we will get to as many as we have time for. So first question, does Data Masons offer an SOC1 report for the managed services?
I don't know the answer to that question. So I would have to find out from the rest of my team. I don't have the answer.
Okay, and we will keep a copy of that question. We'll be able to follow up. Next question, can the reports be the ones we've customized in AX, or are they created in Vantage Point only?
Okay, the report that I showed and the examples are in Vantage Point. The purchase order report is an SSRS-based report, so you would be able to customize that report. Vantage Point is built on a SQL database, so if depending on your deployment option, you would have access to the data to do your own reporting. But there is customization options for reporting in Vantage Point. The emailed reports that I showed a moment ago were not AX reports. They were Vantage Point driven reports.
Okay, next question. Actually, there's a couple people who have just been asking about the recording. We are recording today's event. We will be making access to that recording available after we conclude today, so just please be on the lookout for that for details coming up in the next few days. A question on blanket POs. Will this work with a blanket PO from which we create release sales orders and invoice multiple times off of that blanket PO?
Okay, so the blanket purchase orders in AX are, I believe, referred to as sales agreements. So Data Masons can create transactions in virtually any place inside of AX that has an entity associated with it. So we have the capabilities to create a sales agreement, and in AX7 we haven't analyzed whether or not we can do a release against the sales agreement at this point. We've done it in older versions of AX, but we have not done it in Dynamics 365.
Glenn, there are a couple questions about licensing. One's asking what the Data Masons licensing model is in the case of EDI, and another asking, well, how licenses have changed, although I don't know if that one is specific to Data Masons or if they're asking about Dynamics 365 in that case.
Well, the licensing question is, yeah, the licensing question could be a lengthy explanation. I can say that we base our pricing and licensing based on the value and the functionality that's required. So a company that has very simple needs and might only be dealing with a handful of customers, they're going to pay much less than a company that is working with logistics companies, transport companies, is in the automotive supply chain, and is interacting with suppliers and customers. So it's basically the more formats, the more integrations you need, the higher the price would be.
Okay. Are you able to auto-configure sales lines when an 850 is received? how are the configurable items handled on the inbound 850?
Okay, so items that are, let's say, that have attributes that could be populated based on what came into the sales line. We've done a lot of work in the past of taking data with, in the retail world, assortments and items that have, let's say, components on the inbound order, transforming those, either imploding or exploding those into sales lines that are either configurations or, in a sense, like kits. If it's if you're talking about the configurator where, the item's never been created before and it's built based on all these option choices and so forth, we haven't done that. It's not well suited for that, but I don't know if I fully understand the question. Hopefully I've addressed it to some extent.
Okay. Another question, is this offered as a SaaS solution? And I think, again, asking about the licensing in that, if it is.
The answer is yes. So we
Okay.
have a subscription model. It's cloud-based. Again, we have deployment flexibility, so we do have an option, at least today, of getting a perpetual license where the customer can host it and manage it themselves, or they can get it on a pure subscription, fully managed from Data Masons.
All right. Someone asks, can a customer connect via web services and retrieve a price list that is for his eyes only?
Yes. I mean, that's normal for us. That mostly price lists are customer specific, and we handle the interaction between AX and the customer. And only for the items that would be relevant for them. You can flag the items that only they would be able to see. And of course, it would be their price list.
Do you have an out-of-the-box customization? Do you have out-of-the-box customizations to support different versions of Edi Fact or Edifact standard? For example, DO1.B or D10.A, etc.
The answer is yes. I wouldn't refer to them as customizations. They're EDI standards, which are downloadable from our website. So we have a large array of standards that are accessible, of X12, Edifact, Tradecoms, different types, Rosetta Net, etc.
All right. Is there an... Oh, sorry. All right.
Go ahead.
So next question? Yeah. Is there an error alert when there's a price discrepancy?
It's all configurable. So there's a setting at the trading partner level that determines the behavior. So if there's a price discrepancy, don't integrate, put the order on hold, send an alert, or integrate the order, have the order in a stop state, send out an alert, or just let it go through with the price that's sent by the customer.
Okay, we have a follow-up question to the price list, the previous price list, retrieving a price list question. In that case, will the, I'm sorry, here, so let me see. Will the customer who retrieves the price list see the whole agreement or just open prices according with the trade agreement?
It's all driven by a relationship between the items and the trading partner. So, for example, you might have a price that says this customer gets 10% off of inventory. So that could be all the items in the inventory. So we have a place for you to define which items are considered, saleable and part of the price list for that customer. So basically it has so much flexibility it can't really give you all the scenarios, but there's almost no scenario that we haven't provisioned for in the design.
Okay. Can you load invalid part number lines into AX from an 850 PO since the lines are required back on a PO acknowledgement?
So I think the question is, can we create a sales order with invalid lines in AX in order to get the PO paid back to the trading partner? So the answer is we have done that in the past. Now we don't create them as invalid lines, but rather we mutually agree on an item number that would be provisioned to handle those types of unknown items or error items. But additionally, we can acknowledge directly from the PO even if we don't integrate it into AX. So I just showed you one example of sending a purchase order acknowledgement based on a confirmation, but the POA can be sent directly from the PO without integrating it into AX. So there's different options.
And as a follow-up to that question, Bob made the point that the standard PO field in AX7 Dynamics 365 is not long enough to support PO numbers in X12. And he asks, are you aware of that, and how is it being handled?
We've run into scenarios where data field sizes don't support the standards or what a partner might be transmitting. So when those become a difficulty, then we have a conversation with the customer. You either extend the size of the field. In some cases, you have to add fields to AX to support, labeling and other challenges. Those are aspects that are typically either industry or implementation specific. When I say that there's no customizations needed for AX, I'm referring to all the import, having an EDI module, defining all the relationships between partners and items, and doing all the data scrubbing and data substitutions and so forth that oftentimes you see in an EDI implementation with ERP systems. All that's negated, but there may be point-to-point changes that are required to make it work, depending on the type of data that your partner's sending and the type of functionality you have either customized in AX or implemented in AX.
Okay, what setup on the AX side of things is required? What installs in AX versus outside of it? And do you need to expose all the documents as service points?
Well, out of the box today, the current version of 365 has, as I mentioned, 1,800 data points that are effectively exposed. After, when you install it, it's all part and parcel of the installation. So it's just a matter of configuring security to whom has access to those data points in the system. So it's really more security configuration, AX out of the box, has it all set up out of the gate.
All right, I'm just looking through the remaining questions. So I'm going to apologize in advance if I mess up the name of this one, but do you handle PAPINet or PAPINet?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
I believe they're referring to the network in the paper business, which has its own standards.
Okay. And you mentioned you no longer modify the core of AX. Does this mean you created an extension model? And if so, how much modification is in AX versus in Vantage, okay, in Vantage Point to support all of the scenarios?
Well, since Microsoft delivered the AIF in version 4, we haven't delivered customizations to AX since. Now, we've got these entities that are delivered. They're kind of like AIF endpoints. If you think of the older versions of AX, typically, most of the documents that we would need in AX historically we would have out of the box. The only entities we deliver are the ones that aren't already present in there, but we don't have extensions with new tables and new business logic in there. It's just the added endpoints which provide the map to get the data to the right places. Especially if one doesn't exist, you have to create an entity to talk to the database and to the business objects.
All right. Another question here. Maybe I should make a last call for questions. We're at the top of the hour. Can you take another one or two questions here, Glenn?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. So the question is, once we've upgraded to AX7, how can I prepare for the upgrade of EDI and Vantage Point?
Most of the upgrade effort is going to be the configuration of the integration endpoints and then the validation of all the document flows. So the question sounds like it's coming from an existing user on an older version of AX. And the underlying platform doesn't change, in a significant manner. It's just that the platform now needs to turn to AX7, Dynamics 365, versus looking back at the older version of Dynamics AX. All the data store, all the outbound maps to the trading partners, those don't change. It's just the integration maps that go into AX and the retrieval of data from AX and the maps that talk to the OData endpoints to get that data. Those are the changes that occur, and of course implementing it and validating it is where all the effort's going to be.
Okay, well I think that concludes our list of questions that have come in, so we'll begin wrapping up here. And thanks for the positive feedback. People are saying thank you for the presentation. Yeah, Glenn, thank you very much for taking the time to present to our audience today.
It was a great pleasure, and I thank everyone for taking the time to attend this presentation.
Yeah, I second that. Thanks for all the great questions and for your attention. We really appreciate it. We did record today's event. We'll be making that available, and so please be on the lookout for that too. With that, we will conclude the event. Have a great day, everybody.